What's up? It's interview combat, and I'm here today with Brad Wolf from Direden, as you can read down below. Hey, Brad, how you doing?
Doing great. How's it going?
Pretty good. Brad and I are part of the new YouTube cartel known as the One Page One Shot Club, coming to a screen near you. We've recorded one, or maybe depending on when this comes out, one or two of our one shots put out on various channels. But today we're not here to actual play. Today we are here to do some combat, to do some hand-to-hand fighting over interviewing. Let me read you the rules here real quick. So this is an interview show, but it's not your Papa's interview show. Before each question, the interview and the interviewee are going to make contested attack rolls. The interview, that's me, interviewer, makes a flat d20 roll compared to the interviewee's d20 plus mod. That mod is the number of years you've been YouTubing. So, Brad, how many years have you been YouTubing?
So just over a year. So I guess I get a +1.
Yeah, you'll get +1 to every roll. Results of this contested roll determine if the interviewee gets a hard or a soft question. And the interview also gets a counter spell, 1 question per interview, or roll with advantage once. Or you can silvery barbs me to force a reroll. For each nat 20 you get, or nat 1 I roll, you get an additional counterspell. But feel free. And I've done a couple of these, and nobody has ever actually used any of those additional mechanics. So, but that's entirely up to you. If you just want to subvert expectations and mix things up. Let me do a little sharing here real quick. So I'm gonna roll a d20, so you know what you got to beat. Oh my goodness, you got to beat an 18.
All right, let's see what I got.
All right, with your modified 13, you're going to start off with a hard question. Let's go with this. Have you ever hesitated to explore a particular topic in your videos due to concerns about backlash or misunderstanding from your audience or the larger TTRPG community?
I wouldn't say that I've specifically hesitated on a topic. It's just whenever I get to like thinking about one of those kind of topics, I'm like, I just say no. I think largely because I want to keep my channel focused on game stuff. I don't want to get like sidetracked into other issues or things that might be controversial that aren't related to the game itself.
Yeah, so like when you remember the How to Z controversy from a year and a half ago, that'd be something that you wouldn't have covered on the channel?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have tackled that. I don't know. That's a good question, though. Yeah, because I don't think there's real value in going back and forth on that. I think people have their opinions on each side, and I don't know that me putting out a video is going to change any of that. So, I guess that's where my brain is at. It's like people have their opinions, and they're entitled to them, even if I disagree with them.
Sure. I like to think about that quote that is allegedly attributed to Michael Jordan, although he wouldn't actually say if he said it or not. When they asked him why he wouldn't support this Democratic candidate in his hometown, he said, because Republicans buy shoes too. That's not, he wouldn't, then they asked him about that. He wouldn't admit if he said that or not. So anyway, all right, let's roll on. Here's what you got to beat this time. Is a 10.
All right, let's see.
There you go. Well done. So here is your first softball question. What do you like to play when you're not doing TTRPGs? Board games, video games? What's your other gaming kind of relaxation hobby or non-gaming?
I like tabletop skirmish games, actually. With my kids, I've played a variety of different tabletop skirmish games. With my oldest son, we do Marvel Crisis Protocol and Star Wars Legion. And with one of my daughters, I played Frostgrave for a while. I like all three of those games. They're I used to play Warhammer 40K back in the day, but it's one is ridiculously expensive, and two, Games Workshop is a pretty terrible company as far as how they treat their customers. So I think it's funny how people are, on the WotC hate bandwagon. Not that I'm a big WotC fan, but and WotC hasn't done anything near as bad as Games Workshop. So I don't play Games Workshop games, but yeah, I saw my Games Workshop armies years ago, and I've never looked back. But I've enjoyed since then games put out by smaller companies and more skirmish games versus the big war games where you have to have 100 models on the table to play.
Have you there's my friendly local game store just down the street from where I live. They have a bunch of tables in the back, and I never see anybody playing role-playing games there. I never see anybody playing D&D, but every Saturday and Sunday there are always a bunch of nerds back there playing Warhammer and Warhammer stuff. And these people, they'll bring in huge bags of sand and pour sand all over the tables and set up these desert skirmish. It's super cool just to watch. But I go back there and I'm like, that's $3,000 on that table. It just looks incredibly expensive, and it looks like I'm sure I would enjoy it if I had the time and the money to invest in that. I was going to ask you, have you played the D&D Onslaught game?
I have not. I actually picked up the box, but I mostly just cannibalized the miniatures to use for regular D&D.
Yeah, I did the exact same. Before it came out, there was so much content on YouTube about it. It was this hot new thing. I really wanted it, but it seemed crazy expensive. And then, of course, when it flopped, it went down to 60-70% off, and I picked it up for cheap. I don't know. It was under $100 when I picked it up, but I have not played it yet. My son is a little too young for that, I think. Given by the 30-page rule book, I think it's probably a little too complex for him. But it does have some cool minis.
Talking about the game table, I've never poured real sand onto a table for play, but I did back in the day build my home table in my garage. It was a model of the Blood Gulch map from the original Halo game.
Cool.
So that was my Warhammer table. It was the Blood Gulch map. I don't know if you ever played Halo. That was the.
Oh yeah, I played Halo back in the day. All right, I think we are ready to move on. Your next round 3 fight. You only got to beat a 4.
I think I can do that.
Oh no! Right. 3 total. Oh, so close. So close. Sometimes the dice tell their own story, don't they?
Yeah.
Let's see. What is a mistake you've made behind the screen as a DM, or if you can't think of anything because you're perfect, you can say what's a mistake you've made as a player.
Well, I think the most recent mistake I made, in one of my, I guess it was the campaign from 2 years ago. My gaming group were kind of on a year-by-year pace, so we run a full campaign for the actual calendar year just about. And so one of my players had the Sword of Kos, and I thought it would be really cool once they defeated the villain who had the hand and eye of Vecna, if Kos was freed from the sword, and they had one extra battle against the vampire Kos himself, and overall it turned out to be a really cool into the campaign, and they battled Kos and they beat him. But the player with the Sword of Kos, his whole expectation of how he was going to end the campaign, his kind of prologue would be his character and the sword just wander off together into the sunset. That was his ideal ending. And by having the vampire come out of the sword, it was a big disappointment for him.
So did you retcon any of that, or did you just say oops and move on?
No,
Or did you
we
not
didn't.
find out till later?
Yeah, I didn't know until after. So when we went around the table to do the prologues, that's when he said that that his original prologue was going to be to wander off with the sword. So he was disappointed. But I felt kind of bad about that. But overall, you live and learn.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't have known that you were about to blow their about to change what they saw for their character after the campaign. But I've played in campaigns where I gave the DM some information, like here's part of my backstory or here's what I see happening with my character, and then they just completely change it, and it can be disappointing. Or you can just say, well, I guess that's just the effect of collaborative storytelling is sometimes you don't get to be the boss of what's happening in the future.
Yeah, it's a fine line to walk with Game Master to be able to give your players a plot twist and surprise them, but at the same time not step on their backstory or their expectations of their character.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let us go to round 4. Right. Mr. Direden, you need to beat a 14. Oh, you rolled on top of my die. That was weird. I didn't know this could do that. Anyway, you just like these hard questions. So I know you said you didn't want to get into controversial topics, but too bad, Brad. Do you think WotC is a good shepherd of the D&D brand?
I don't think they're terrible. I certainly think they could be better. There's a lot of things I wish they would do better, but overall, I could see it being a lot worse. I think the OGL situation is a perfect example of that, where I'm assuming higher ups, made that call, and because we have seen interviews with folks from the design team, or at least one person from the design team said that they said it wasn't a good idea, they weren't listened to. So, but yeah, and ultimately, they're a corporation. They're beholden to shareholders, and they're going to do what they do because their bottom line is profit, right? So, right. I don't think any company is going to be fantastic at it because they're managing opposed agendas, right? They have shareholders that they want to impress, and they want to make their multi-millions of dollars, and it's going to be hard to do all of that and be a good steward of the brand, right? So, but I mean, we go back to TSR; they weren't exactly an outstanding steward of the brand either. TSR made a lot of bad business decisions that bankrupt the company. So, if you don't have a company, you can't be a good steward of the brand either.
Yeah, that's fair. What do you think they could do better?
I think, ultimately, the best thing they could do for the brand is put out quality products. I think there's, like I saw your review of the new Vecna adventure, and agreed with most of your takes on that. And I think that was a perfect example of like too many cooks in the kitchen. That instead of just letting the game designers make a good adventure, it seems like there were multiple agendas. Like, well, it's the 50th anniversary, so we have to put in all these different worlds, and we have to put in all these different villains. Strahd has to make a cameo, and these characters have to make a cameo. And I think that you can tell that there was just too many. There's too many cooks in the kitchen, too many masters. Saying do this, do this, do this, and then the game designers were trying to squeeze all of that into a relatively short book.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. The Vecna Eve of Ruin was a big missed opportunity. But then also you have, I think it was Chris Perkins who said that his philosophy for designing 5e adventures was that he just assumes that the DMs are going to rip out and change half of it. So that's a very interesting design philosophy where you put out a book where you assume that people aren't going to use half of it and are going to replace it with stuff. So how do you design for that?
Yeah, and I can see Chris Perkins saying that coming, because I mean he's been around for decades, right? He was playing D&D back when everything was like modules, right? Like Matt Colville talked about recently in his video, and I think it is good for you as a game master to think of yours as modular components that you can mix and match. I don't think that many game masters out there are in that mindset. So I think if while I kind of agree with Chris Perkins that I would expect people to mix up the adventure and do what they want to do with it, I don't know that I would write the adventure the way they're doing it if that's the case. I guess if that makes sense. So like
Sure.
if you're approaching it with that mindset of here's a bunch of chapters in this adventure that you can pull apart and mix and do what you want with them, right? Then explicitly say that in the beginning and give examples. I think that's one way they can make the products better, and that's why I haven't done a lot of like reviews of adventures on my channel, because as a game master, I probably have different expectations than most people. Like I could pick up the new Vecna book, and I would run that without really thinking about it, and probably change a lot of different things along the way. But I realize that most people aren't going to approach it that way. So it's kind of hard for me to give a review, like a product review, because my expectations are a lot lower, I think, than the average game master. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. As a reviewer, you have to look at what's there. You can't look at it and give a review based on what it could be if I replaced all these bad parts with better things. And hopefully the new 5.5 or whatever it is Dungeon Master's Guide is going to give better instruction to new DMs, because that's where it's really a problem, right? Guys like you and me who've been doing it for a while, we can look at something and go, well, my players aren't going to like that, so let's swap this out for something else. But a new dungeon master isn't really going to know how to do that. They're just going to see the words there and go, well, these are the experts who wrote it, so I guess I should do it like it says here, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where WotC overall could improve. I think one of the things they do well is the feedback, like the Unearthed Arcana, like getting feedback on the different game mechanics and doing all those surveys. But I think that collects a lot of data based on what players want, because I'm assuming most people look at those and like, oh yeah, that makes the paladin better, or that nerfs the druid a little bit, but that's fair. And like they're giving feedback based on all these different classes and subclasses and all these player options. We don't see a lot of products specifically for dungeon masters, and products they do put out for dungeon masters, they're not doing surveys on, right? So I think that's where I think the real potential lies to make the hobby better, is giving game masters solid advice and solid direction on how to run adventures, how to design campaigns, and all that sort of thing. So I think that's where Wizards of the Coast could do a much better job, and hopefully the new Dungeon Master's Guide is a good step in that direction. I think they also tried with the deck of many things. I think that was actually one of their first real products designed for a game master, and giving you tools that you could use to build campaigns with. But then, they had the terrible problem with the cards being the wrong size or whatever, and had to delay it and all that sort of thing, and the price points looked really high because you're getting cards and a book. I don't know. I applaud them for that attempt. I think that was a good attempt, even though it wasn't well executed.
Yeah, I got that book of many things with the cards, and I thought it was one of the best things they've done in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a pretty good book, but for some reason it just didn't land with a lot of people. But speaking about the 1D&D UA, of course, they're like, we made the rogue more powerful and people like it. Well, of course they do. Nobody's going to complain about a character class being more powerful. I hope they took that into account, and they're like, well, yeah, of course you up their damage and the players are going to like that more because they want to be cool. They want to be superheroes.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next round. Mr. Brad, you need to beat only a 3.
All right.
And you did handily, sir. Okay. Your next softball question. What's your take on incorporating homebrew or house rule elements into your games, and how do you address them in your videos?
So I'm a big proponent of using homebrew rules, but keeping them limited. I run with maybe 4 or 5 rules that are homebrew for my campaigns, and I think that's kind of where my advice is. Don't if your homebrew rules can fill more than half a page, then you probably got too many. But I'm a big advocate for like design the game that you want to play, and if you can come up with a few solid homebrew rules that make the gameplay better or more like what you and your players want, go for it. But then again, you also have to make sure everybody's on the same page with it.
Sure.
And I think it's just a matter of like, don't overdo it. If you can't remember them all, then you probably got too many.
Sure. Yeah. I've seen homebrew and rules from other systems to steal suggested to me all the time, and one thing that always happens is anytime somebody comes out with a subsystem, they're like, I invented a way to play football in Dungeons and Dragons. And then if it's 4 pages of rules, there's no way I'm going to do it. If your subsystem is it takes me more than 3 minutes to learn it, then I'm going to have to explain it to my players. Then we're going to have to implement it. If it's complicated, just not going to do it. So there's my advice to anyone who's making subsystems or add-ins for D&D, make them simple if you want people to actually use them.
I will say,
go ahead.
One of the most fun homebrew rules that we've implemented is with death saves. So we do 1 death save, and you get 3 options. So the first one is called Hand of Fate, which is you roll the dice and see if you live or die. The second option is permanent injury. So you automatically succeed on your death save, but you have to take a -2 to one of your ability scores. And that's turned out fun because, then it becomes something to role play. Like the rogue in our current campaign has a big scar on her face where she took a -2 to her charisma. The paladin has taken a -2 to his intelligence twice. So he's gone from like a 12 down to an 8. So he role plays like he has memory issues.
Brain injury.
Yeah. And then the third option is the Blaze of Glory, where you fail your death save, but you go out with a automatic critical hit. And I've got one player who almost went out in his 3rd Blaze of Glory last week. The other players managed to keep him alive, and kept him from dying, but he just loves making new characters. So whenever he has a chance to go out and play the story, he does.
These rules they're very familiar to the way Daggerheart does it.
Yeah, that's where I got it from. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. My home group, one of my home groups, we're strongly considering switching over to Daggerheart. We're going to at least try it for a mini arc in the campaign, which And the more I read about Daggerheart, the more I like it. So I'm kind of hoping that we might actually ditch 5e and switch full time over to Daggerheart. But we got to see how it plays out at the table first. Maybe we'll all hate it when it's actually in practice, but I'm excited for it because it seems like cool, simple. I wouldn't call it rules light. It's more like rules medium, right? But it's certainly more simple than 5e. That's definitely for sure.
Yeah, I've looked into it a little bit. I haven't really fully digested the rules, but I'm interested. I definitely want to play it and see.
Yeah, I did get to play it. I played with some strangers online last week. We had a very simple one shot, just on a little quick adventure with one combat, and it was the thing I was most concerned about was the combat. Like, would it actually flow with no initiative? And it all went smoothly. It was like combat was quick. We were working together. Like, I thought it would be chaos, with everybody just goes when they want to. And I thought it was going to be hectic, but the DM was good. But it worked a lot better than I thought it would. So I suppose we'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten good reviews. I guess one thing I'm curious about is how does it hold up over time? Because I feel like good game masters, good game masters are going to be able to make a good game out of almost any system. And so far, all the reviews I've heard and all the comments I've heard are from people who are already pretty solid game masters. So I'm curious how it plays with a bunch of newbies, right?
Yeah.
I think that would be the sign of a really good game is like a bunch of new players who've not really had a lot of experience can pick it up and play it just as easily as the experienced game master can.
Yeah, and also that it only has stats for level 1 to 10. So I'm wondering if at some point in the future after the main product comes out, if they'll release like advanced Daggerheart that has levels 11 through 15 or 11 through 18 or 20. Because I suspect that Critical Role is going to switch over to using this, and you'd think that if you want to do Critical Role does these 3-4 year long campaigns. So I don't know if levels 1 through 10 is going to be meaty enough for them to do a big full multi-year Critical Role arc, but I don't know. We'll see.
Of course, I might watch Critical Role if they didn't do 3 to 4 year campaigns.
Yeah, I hear that.
Maybe switching to a system with only 10 levels will shorten it down to like a year and a half.
Yeah, it's fair to say that like when you watch Critical Role, it really becomes more of a lifestyle than it is just a show you watch, because it takes up a good chunk of my time every week. That's a 4-hour show every week is a serious commitment. But I really enjoy it. I think we got time for one more question. Let's hit it up. Maybe we'll do a lightning round here. Let's see what you got, Brad. If you got a nat 20 in you, now's the time. Do you need to beat a 12?
I accidentally rolled twice.
That's fine. That's fine. You can roll with advantage. I'll allow it. You got an 18. Let's see. Here's a good one to go out on. How did you get into YouTubing?
So I originally, 6 years ago, started watching Runehammer and Matt Colville and Nerdarchy way back in the day. And, I've been DMing since the 80s. So I was like, I could do that. So I actually started the channel back then. And then I ended up having some serious health issues and all that sort of stuff that delayed everything. So I didn't start until last year. But yeah, so it was largely because I saw those guys and I was like, I know enough about D&D that I could share my 2 cents. So that was pretty much it. I was like, I just want to be like those guys.
Yeah, that is a that is a common thing in the entertainment industry, that we just looked at somebody else and went, I could do that.
Right. Yep. probably if I had started back then when I wanted to, you know, things would be a lot different.
I mean, of course, I wish I'd started my YouTube channel 5 years earlier. I'd be in a lot different place now, but I started when I started. That's just how it is. Well, okay, I think we can wrap things up now. Brad, why don't you tell the people where to find you?
So yeah, Direden at YouTube, and I do have a Patreon alongside that that's slowly growing, and you can also find me on Instagram as well and other social media. Mostly, I'm just on YouTube, sharing my thoughts on this fantastic hobby of ours.
What kind of stuff do you have on your Patreon? What are some of your perks and bonuses there?
Well, I don't have it yet, so all my stuff is free. On Patreon, all my stuff is free, and I use that right now as a platform because I do some dungeon design stuff on my channel. So whenever I design a new dungeon or have an adventure that goes along with it, the dungeon I'm using as an example on the video, I'll post that up. So you can get some free adventures on there if you sign up as a Patreon. And but eventually I'm going to add other levels and more content there and have the paid levels and all that sort of stuff. But right now it's all free, and you can get a couple of adventure dungeons out of it.
Nice. You heard it here, folks. You can join for now, for the time being, you can join the Direden Patreon for free and get tons of free stuff. So can't beat free as a price point.
Nope.
All right, Brad Wolf from Direden, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you all later.
Have a good one.